I'd like to introduce our next introducer. He is the Regional Secretary for the United Kingdom, Channel Islands, and Ireland, Brother Martin Cox. I'll turn over the floor to you.
Thank you, Marty. Our next speaker really needs no introduction, but having said that, I think for the audience it's best if I set out some of the details so they can understand who he actually is. His name is Dr. Mike Kearsley. His contribution is the title Rob Morris, the Conservators, and the Failure to Establish a Grand Lodge of the United States. Now, the teaser in this section is, who was Rob Morris? Masonic dreamer and innovator, perhaps, or a self-serving charlatan? A man whose legacy has had such an effect on the American Masonic family is clearly a multifaceted individual worth studying, who we will learn more about shortly. But let's get on to Dr. Mike, and I'll let you know that through his Masonic journey, Dr. Mike Kearsley has time and time again proved himself a prolific researcher and author. In 2011, he was awarded the Norman B. Spencer Essay Prize for his paper on the formation of the Grand Lodge of New Zealand. In 2014, he was appointed the Prestonian Lecturer for his work entitled 1814 Consolidation and Change, the First Year of the United Grand Lodge of England. And in 2019, the Australian and New Zealand Masonic Research Council Lecturer. So Dr. Kearsley holds the grand ranks of past Deputy Grand Director of Ceremonies under the Grand Lodge of New Zealand and past Provincial Grand Orator for the Provincial Grand Lodge of Middlesex under United Grand Lodge of England. I think with that, I'd like to hand you over to Dr. Mike Kearsley, who I'm sure will be quite entertaining in what he has to say. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Martin. I hope you can all hear me. Can you put the first slide up, my first slide up? Thank you very much. Yes, good day, as we say in this part of the world. I did tell my friends here that we were doing this, we're having this session. And then when they found out that it was going to be at 4 a.m. for us here in New Zealand and 2 a.m. for Eastern Australia, somehow they lost interest. But thank you, the rest of you, for turning up. Now, we've heard quite a lot this morning, wherever you are. Next slide, please. About this guy. William Morgan. Nobody really knows what William Morgan looked like, but he has various pictures that are presented of what William Morgan might have looked like, and the Morgan affair. And I can understand why Americans in particular learn about William Morgan, because it was a hugely traumatic event in their Masonic history. And therefore I accepted what had been written until I realized that the entire report of the Morgan affair was actually written by one man, Rob Morris. Next slide, please. This guy. Yep, that's him, Rob Morris. And he, writing over 30 years after the event. And there were things in his account that just didn't stack up for me. But it wasn't until I read a book, next slide, please, by Stephen Darfo about Morgan, that some of my suspicions were confirmed. And Stephen presented that Rob Morris was, shall we say, bending the truth. Indeed, he wrote an article for us in the Square. I was the editor of the Square, which was called The Lie Rob Morris Told. And it couldn't make it clearer that what Rob Morris was doing in all of this was justifying Freemasonry when in fact they had actually been naughty boys. Also, during this time, I made contact with a certain Reverend Jan Biederstadt, American, and he had also had a long time interest in Rob Morris, but he'd gone and collected lots of papers and documents and so on about Rob Morris, and he offered to share them with me. So as a result of that, I finished up writing my own paper on Morris, for AQC, which is the transactions of the Quatuor Coronati Lodge, providing more light about this guy, Rob Morris. And as editor of the Square magazine, new slide, please. Oh, we've jumped one. Go back one. Can you go back one? But that's it. The Square magazine. We also included an article about Rob Morris and included some of the things I'm talking about. Rob Morris, there he is, the guy who started the Eastern Star, his trip to the Holy Land, self-appointed poet laureate of Freemasonry, the founder of the short-lived Masonic University, and the creator of a group called the Conservators. And so when I was asked to contribute to the conference, the Boston conference, or had an opportunity to, and I wanted something that was American, if you wish, I thought about the Conservators. I thought it would be a good one, because I had some documents about this, etc. And I had copies of the Conservators magazine, courtesy of Jan Biederstadt. And of course, what the Conservators were all about was trying to create a standard ritual for the United States, because everybody was doing their own thing wherever they were, differences in ritual. And the ultimate aim, of course, was perhaps a united Grand Lodge of America. Not a new idea. George Washington had been asked, would he be the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of America, but he had other things on his plate at the time. Now, as I got involved in this, what emerged was an interesting, different picture about Rob Morris. No doubt a dedicated Freemason, but yet another Mason for whom Masonry was both a passion and a profession, a means to earn money. And when you start making money out of something, especially something which is essentially a voluntary organization, this is going to get you into trouble. You are going to develop a bit of resistance. And that is exactly what happened with the Conservators. It's interesting, isn't it, that Freemasonry seems to throw up these people constantly in its history. Desaguliers, Dunkerley, Casanova, Cagliostro, McCoy, Albert Pike, Robert Lomas, and so on. People who are no doubt dedicated Freemasons, but their behaviors and their qualities are not always quite as noble as they would like you to believe. They are ambitious, of course, and they try to develop all sorts of things. And the minute you do that in an organization like Freemasonry, you are going to get resistance, you are going to get critics, and you are going to make enemies. And that is exactly what happened with Rob Morris, partly because of what he was trying to do, partly because of what he was, but also because of the way that he went around it. I think, what was the moral that came out for me as I ventured into this? And I think it was that Freemasonry, the state of Freemasonry, depends, of course, on what Freemasons are in any place at any time. And the members we have in Freemasonry and their behaviors and their attitudes will, of course, determine what Freemasonry is, but also how Freemasonry is perceived. So, for example, Rob Morris had painted a picture of the innocent Freemasons in the Morgan affair, wrongly accused of these terrible things when they were all innocent babes. And of course, that was not necessarily the truth. Stephen Darfo said it was a lie. So Rob Morris and his Conservators were defeated largely by what Rob Morris himself was, how they went about doing it, but also by the entrenched parochialism of the membership, who, I'm sorry to say, often placed ego, position, and power over any kind of change. So nothing new there. New foil, please. And these are the kind of accusations that were laid against Rob Morris and against the Conservators, that they were presumptuous, mercenary, and ambitious. They were terribly secretive about what they were doing. And of course, the minute you're secretive, people think you've got something to hide. They were working against the Grand Lodges in the various states. They were disobedient, considered to be. And as they were promoting a standard ritual, which a few people said wasn't actually any better, or wasn't any more genuine than the rituals that they already have. Well, I've traveled to a lot of countries and a lot of Masonic jurisdictions, and I have noticed a few things. I've noticed, for instance, that wherever you go, things are done differently. Uh, but people who are doing these things are absolutely convinced that what they're doing is the right thing. And that in some cases, they think that everybody else is doing the same thing as them. Of course, the English take it one step further and argue that everybody should be doing what they're doing because we invented it. Yeah, right. What I tell them down here is, guys, you also invented rugby, soccer, and cricket, and look where that got you. Anyway, so on a personal note, new foil, please. On a personal note, I like this. I like the differences of Freemasonry around the world. I like seeing them and experiencing them. And if I had been around at the time, I probably would have resisted Rob Morris and his Conservators the same as all the other people did. So what I say is, vive la différence. You'll have to read the paper to get the full background of what was going on. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mike, for that interesting resume on the person who you have written a lot about. It does pose a few questions which I would like to put to you, if you don't mind. One is, Rob Morris seems to be a true character of his time. Can you suggest a similar character in English/British Freemasonry?
Well, I've given a few names, of course, like Dunkerley, and the one today, of course, is Robert Lomas, who is an English Mason who's written quite a lot of books about the Hiram key and discovering the Hiram key and recutting the Hiram key and so on and whatever. And he's yet another person who takes all the promises not to reveal anything and then immediately writes a book and reveals everything and makes money out of it. And history of Freemasonry is full of these people, all revealing the so-called secrets, etc. And at the time of William Morgan, the secrets were actually available if you wanted them. There was nothing really outstanding about somebody saying, I'm going to reveal these secrets. In fact, Rob Morris was going to do a very similar thing himself with, and what they use, they use a, what do they call it? A cipher, where you can read of the whole ritual, but it's all in gobbledygook until you decipher what's going on. So yes, there are plenty of these people in Freemasonry. Well, you'd expect that, wouldn't you, with so many people that we've had in Freemasonry.
Thanks, Mike. Another question coming in. Do you believe William Morgan was actually killed, or is this simply a Masonic fan legend?
He is abducted. He's taken away by people who are determined that he's not going to do what he says he's going to do. He disappears and his body is never found. It suggests that something happened to him, and I, in my heart, think yes. Now, you heard Brent saying maybe there was an accident, maybe he fell overboard, maybe he was drunk and did whatever. No, maybe they killed him. With all the members that we've got, we've had plenty of criminals and plenty of bad boys in Freemasonry, and I'm sure that in the heat of the moment, they may very well have killed him. But what they did, of course, is that there were later stories that he'd been seen in Turkey, and he'd been seen somewhere in Canada, and he'd been seen in Australia, would you believe, where he was living a decent life, etc., etc. My own view, I think they killed him.
Okay, that sounds interesting. There's another question, if I can. Did Morris ultimately help or hurt American Freemasonry?
Good question. Good question.
Someone's playing devil's advocate for sure.
Well, that is a very good question, and we could talk about it. He certainly made it better known in many ways. I think we could have a debate on that. I think that would be a really good thing. In fact, I might organize that here. We'll have a debate on did he help or did he hinder? I'm going to stay on the fence at the moment.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for your input for the meeting today. I'm sure everybody's found it most interesting. Thank you very much.